Full transparency, guys, this video is in no way a deep dive into the tech or specs of the Nintendo Switch 2, and I even gloss over some of the features that it offers. So if you're looking for something with a lot of substance, I recommend going to more of the professional channels. This is more so my first impressions as an average consumer of Nintendo products. In addition, I said I wasn't thinking about buying this thing, and I ended up caving. I'm a hypocrite. And that's because I actually have the financial means to do so. So that's just my justification for it. Was like I had some money, so I was able to spend it. Also, I do make content here on YouTube. Some FOMO was thrown in there as well. I understand I am part of the problem. When people just keep using their wallets to show support for something, then these companies keep getting away with it. And I know I've preached about this before. So yeah, I am completely in the wrong here. I am neither a Nintendo shill, nor am I a Nintendo hater. I have loved things Nintendo has done and created. I have absolutely despised some choices Nintendo has done and created. I like to think of myself as a unbiased party, which is basically a fallacy in of itself, but I'm going into this with just my consumer brain. I purchased this. Do I have buyer's remorse? Do I hate the system? Do I love the system? That's what we're talking about here. It's my opinion, my experience. So you're obviously going to have different thoughts and opinions that I'm happy to see down in the comments below, even though I know 80 to 90% of you won't have even purchased the system, and you will either be on Team Nintendo or Team Anti-Capitalism, throw it all into the fire. So we're just going to see where this takes us, okay? So against my better judgment, I bought a Nintendo Switch 2. I actually got it on the day of launch, and I wanted to talk about it. Originally, I wasn't planning on getting the Switch 2. I realized that it's already outdated hardware due to how long it's taken for them to even make these things. But on top of that, the price point was too high, being at almost $500, along with them making games $80 or more based off of their own discretion. And I just don't think Nintendo games are worth that much money. I've talked about this countless times in other videos on this channel and other channels that I have, that games are subjective. I get that. And Nintendo makes solid games for the most part. However, they are increasing the price because they know they can because of their familiar IP and franchises, even though most games, such as like Mario Odyssey and stuff of the like, only take a few hours to beat and only have a little bit of replayability. It's because Nintendo knows people will go out and buy Mario, Zelda, Pokemon at that extra price point that they decided to go ahead and do it. And my issue with this is, one, I don't think there has been a Nintendo game out there that's necessarily worth the $80 price tag, unless you want to count like the big RPGs like Zelda, which you can be lost in for hours upon hours. But it's also setting a bad precedent for other video game companies that are very greedy and just want to rake up the prices for competition and to get more profit. However, I understand they are businesses, they need to do this, but at what point does the consumer get punished? And I think we're getting to that point. Now, I'm no economic expert, nor do I claim to be. I'm not an accountant, I'm not a professional, so that's just, I'm letting you know right now, like, I'm actually bad at math. However, I am aware that during these times, especially in the United States, there is an economic crisis where things are inflating to absurd prices. Groceries are just becoming way too much. Using groceries as an example, let's say, we'll be very generous, the average person spends $100 on groceries a week. That's really hard to do, actually, especially if you cook a lot and you don't go out and eat. Buying ingredients, seasoning, stuff like that, like, it's going to end up being more than $100. So if you have a full family, a mom, a dad, and 2 kids, that's $400, give or take, right there for groceries for, let's be generous and say, 2 weeks. So a Switch 2, is going to be pretty much your entire grocery bill for the month. Not to mention, in America, at least in a lot of parts of the different states, the rent is just astronomically high right now. If you don't own a house, which is a whole nother crisis, a housing market crisis, if you are renting, you're spending upwards of like $3,000 just for a 2-bedroom apartment. And I'm not making that up. So yeah, if people are making smart decisions when it comes to their budget and money, they're not going to be spending it on a Switch or Switch games. However, there is a twist to this in the fact that Nintendo actually didn't really make the Switch with a lot of profit margins. They actually kind of lost money with it, meaning that they try to keep the price as low as possible for the consumer, which I have to give them credit for, because I'm about to go into the Switch 2 and what I like and don't like about it, but I do need to give them my roses where I can. So yeah, the Switch 2 is technically outdated hardware at this point. However, there are some things I would like to mention. One, the screen is a lot bigger, the Joy-Cons feel a lot better, and aside from the GameCube controller adapters, your Switch 1 Joy-Cons, Pro controllers, they all work for the Switch 2, which I think is huge and would have been a total killing point for me getting the Switch 2 if I couldn't use my older controllers, because yes, the Terras do have something to do with it, but the Joy-Cons and the accessories for the Switch are redonkulous. They are about $90 as of recording. Some other positives: transferring your data from the Switch 1 to the Switch 2 is super easy, and I really am baffled by the technology, even though I know by 2025 I shouldn't be. You just turn on your Switch 1, put it up to your Switch 2, make sure you're signed into your Nintendo account with a QR code, and you're pretty much set up. I mean, obviously you need Wi-Fi in order to do all of this, but once you get the Switch and you update it and then sync the two together, you're pretty much golden. It doesn't take more than 5 minutes to set up, and I was actually really surprised by this. Flipping back to a negative, although they did change a little bit of the UI system for the Switch 2 and everything seems more crisp and fluid, once again those Joy-Cons feel really nice and you got a bigger screen for better resolution, they didn't really do anything with the themes or the overall look of the Switch. It still has that very sterile choose white or choose black background, so that was a little bit disappointing that we couldn't do a little bit more customization or unlock, certain backgrounds based off of games from Nintendo IP. I mean, even Sony is guilty of this. They don't have themes or backgrounds after the PS4, so I just don't know what we're doing here with the bare minimum, but that's just another complaint I have. If you own games virtually, you will be given a virtual card. The Switch 1 already had an update where your digital downloads became little virtual cards, and that's basically how you can play on the Switch 2. If you have those downloads, you transfer them over. Like I said, it's very quick and seamless, but the catch is you can't play it at the same time. So if I want to play Super Smash Bros. As a virtual card, because I have that one downloaded, I don't have a physical copy. If I have that on my Switch 2, I can't boot up my Switch 1 and just start playing it. It has to move that virtual card back over to the Switch 1, so that way the data stays saved. It's very annoying. I'm not really quite sure the purpose of that, but once you move back, you have to switch over the virtual cards. You might be wondering, well, why are you even moving back if you have the Switch 2? And my answer to that is I want it to show the difference in load times, speeds, and stuff like that for games that I own for the Switch 1. And yeah, rightfully so, all of the games do load quicker. Now, you can opt in to spend an extra $5-10, I can't remember the exact price, on Switch 1 games to completely upgrade them for the Switch 2. However, you can just play the base Switch 1 version games on the Switch 2, and they run quicker, which is great. And like I said, it should happen regardless. I just wanted to test that out. And what's crazy is I can now play Super Smash Bros. Ultimate and shuffle through the skins and alternate character looks without waiting for them to load in. Because for those of you that played Smash Ultimate, especially if you had a digital copy of the game, your skins just wouldn't load in. It would take forever, and you would just be shuffling like a blank slate until eventually it decided to load in. Now it's almost instant, and I can't really fully give the Switch 2 roses for that, because like I said, for the third time, this should just be a default thing since it's better, more powerful hardware. But that's where it kind of leads into my overall thoughts for the Switch 2. Yeah, I'm not going super deep into it because there's so many other channels out there of people that actually know more about the tech, the specs, and stuff like that. But I just want to say the Switch 2 is what we deserved back when the Switch 1 came out. And I know there's probably going to be a lot of Nintendo fans really mad at me, a lot of tech heads that are like, well, technically, during that time, blah, 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 technology didn't exist yet. No, listen, we should have gotten everything that the Switch 2 is as the Switch 1. We should have been able to have games that loaded in quick, that had skins that moved around quick. We should have had a bigger screen, better Joy-Cons. Now, we don't know if these Joy-Cons are going to drift. We'll have to wait and see on that. Which also reminds me, I think there was like a terms and service thing you agree to when you start up the Switch saying, yeah, you can't sue Nintendo if things go wrong. But I mean, all companies are doing that. They're protecting themselves. It's not just Nintendo doing that, but I'm not surprised. Regardless, what I'm trying to say is we really deserved this back in whenever the Switch 1 came out. Was it like 2016? Okay, it was 2017. So the Switch 1 came out in 2017, and it's not a bad system. I have it, I own it. It was $300 though, and the games were anywhere from $50 to $60, and I think that was a fair price point. And I understand competition, and you have to build up more profit as you go on throughout the years as a company, but Nintendo is one of those companies that could really keep the price the same. They could set the standard and be like, all right, we're not going to gouge prices, we're not going to cheap out the consumer, and they kind of did it. And it's just going to be a domino effect for games coming out. And we just got the Game Fest, and we got the Xbox Showcase and stuff like that, and games are now being announced at $80. We knew this was coming once Nintendo announced it, and it's really sad, but I think that's the takeaway. I do think the Switch 2 is a bit too expensive for what it's worth, especially during the time right now where everything is really pricey. I think if you can afford it and you have it budgeted out for your means and you really, really support Nintendo and you know you're going to be spending $80 on games, then you can consider purchasing this. But if you are on the fence, I really would recommend waiting because one, there's not a lot of Nintendo Switch 2 games out yet, and then two, it's just too pricey. I'm hoping the markets will go down because we know Nintendo doesn't mark down their items ever. Or possibly you can wait for someone to sell a used version on eBay or something like that for a little less of the price. If you are a parent, yeah, this is really pricey. If you got to choose between feeding your kids or giving them video games, like it's a complete no-brainer. And then if one has one and the other one keeps fighting for it and you have to get them a secondary Switch, yeah, they have the game share feature, which I haven't tried out. I haven't mentioned a lot of stuff on here if you haven't noticed. I haven't mentioned the stand, I haven't mentioned the online capabilities, the shitty mic, and the very cheap knockoff Discord that they have where they're trying to make it their own like Nintendo branded social sort of thing. I haven't talked about those because I haven't tried them out yet, and I don't really plan to. So that's also another big factor is I'm only using 80% of the Switch 2's capabilities. I'm not even using all the features that it offers because I really don't care, because I know that other 20% is bullshit. It's just extra fluff to make you feel like you're getting more of your investment, but it's really not. So that's also where I'm a little bit upset with the price point. I think they could have knocked it down $25, $30 or so, maybe even $100, and just gotten rid of this stupid online chatting mic thing. That is completely unnecessary for the system. I just think they were just trying to justify that price point. So what about the launch title, Mario Kart World? Well, I actually did a whole separate video reviewing that game, so you can click right here to watch that. Just like this video, it's not super in-depth. There's plenty of other channels for that kind of stuff. It's just my initial thoughts and first impressions. I'm OC Disaster, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. See ya.